Hi everyone, I'm Andrew. Really happy to be part of such a big product people gathering, so thanks for coming, especially those of you from out of town. I moved to Hamburg 2 years ago from San Francisco, where I had spent pretty much all of my career, started as a designer, and later became a product manager. I'll talk about the career a little bit, but in 2011 I joined Yelp, and part of my motivation for joining Yelp at the time was that the product and engineering team was about 150 people. There were about 10 product managers. It felt like a nice scale that I could get into and be effective and all of that. Interestingly, when the people that I interviewed with, I would always ask them the question, what's the culture like here? And inevitably they would use the word fun, which I didn't believe. I sort of thought like, it's bullshit. Work can't be that much fun. But it seemed like a good signal, and I loved the product and joined anyway. So we're going to talk a little bit about how what fun really means in Yelp's culture. And I think whereas the previous talks have been a little more theoretical, this one's going to be pretty practical, talking about a lot of the things that, for me, make it fun. But this talk is about culture, so let's kind of dig into that. And primarily, it's actually about the balance between product and engineering culture. I'll try to illustrate that through a couple of examples from my career. And you might be thinking to yourself like, oh, what's balance between product and engineering? If you're thinking that, then congratulations, you might be at a company that has a great balance between product and engineering. In my experience, it's quite hard, and I've had other experiences which you'll see, but it's something that I think is important to talk about. So as Mark mentioned, I started my career at eBay, which was an amazing place to work, and I love eBay in a lot of ways. But it has a very product-heavy culture. PMs have, I would say, more access to executives. They are held more responsible for decision-making. And I would say they just have a little bit more weight when it comes to decisions that are being made. Engineering absolutely has a seat at the table, especially leadership. But engineers themselves, on a kind of an operational basis, might be in a different building entirely, or might be in a different country altogether. So product managers, we were working, this is a little bit pre-agile, or at least we didn't know about it. So we're writing long specs, kind of throwing them over the wall to the engineers, and they were sometimes interpreting them not exactly how we intended, but because PMs and engineers didn't have a really strong connection, and in some ways I would say engineers did not feel empowered to push back or to give feedback or what have you, it was a challenge to get things done on time and properly and all of that. To give a counterexample, I joined a company called Silver Spring Networks in 2009. You have not heard of Silver Spring Networks, and if you have, please find me and we'll talk about it. It's a company that makes wireless radios and software for electric utilities. It is an awesome industry. I'm being sarcastic there. It's tough. It's really tough. And actually, I think it explains a little bit the weighting towards engineering, because our clients were the IT staffs of electrical utilities who have incredible requirements for uptime and reliability and all of that. And in fact, the engineering leadership had, I would say, just a stronger say in what we needed to do in our product to actually get what our customers wanted. And I wouldn't say that PMs were relegated to the sidelines, but we actually focused primarily on sales and sort of managing that roadmap of requests from customers, I would say, to the detriment of driving a mission or a vision for where that product actually needed to be. So that was the challenge there. You probably saw this coming, but Yelp, in my opinion, has one of the better balances between product and engineering. So we'll go into that in much more detail here about how we do that and why it's important. First, I think it's important to point out that our organizational structure is not our operational model. Organizationally, we have kind of silos for product and engineering. So there's a senior VP of product and a senior VP of engineering. They both report to the CEO, and we tend not to ask the CEO to break ties. So we want to work things out amongst ourselves, and I think developing a supportive culture is a big part of that. Oh, my boxes are missing. So the operational model is we've got to work together. And incidentally, I wanted to show here, product at Yelp includes product managers, data scientists, and designers. So how do we do that? Daily stand-ups, kind of standard agile stuff. On a weekly basis, engineering managers and product managers are coordinating the schedule, the schedules and prioritization and so on. Most of the teams do executive reviews with the executive team. Hey, here's what we're doing. Here's where our challenges are. Here's some of the issues we're facing. On a quarterly basis, we use the OKR system for setting goals. And we also create our roadmaps on a quarterly basis. Both disciplines have to sign off on those goals and those roadmaps. It's not just, hey, product really wants to do this and engineering just goes along with it, or vice versa. And then on an annual basis, we do our budget planning, like I think most companies do. And so if there's a big product initiative that we're going after, engineering needs to staff up to accommodate that, and vice versa. So it's just sort of constant, on a regular basis and at multiple levels of the company. And when I was talking about this, I'm excited about the tactical, where the rubber meets the road. But I think this ultimately comes down to our values as a company and how those are expressed in the product and engineering team. Yelp has sort of what I would describe as corporate values. You can see here: be unboring, be tenacious, play well with others, be authentic, and protect the source. The ones I'm going to describe a separate set of values that I think are the most, they're the ways that these values play themselves out in the product and engineering org and help us to be successful. So the first is that we are egalitarian. There is no one in the product and engineering organization that has a senior title. There's no senior PMs, there's no senior engineers, there's no principal product managers. It's done deliberately because we feel that everyone should have an equal voice in a discussion, and that just because someone has only been with the company for a couple of years or only has a certain amount of experience, that they should be shut down by someone with a senior title or something like that. It's worth mentioning that this runs up against a little bit of resistance in Germany specifically, where at least as far as I can tell, and I'm an American, so I'm trying not to impose my stereotypes too much or anything like that, but people really care about title, and seniority is really important. And we've had difficult conversations with people who want to join the team and need the title, but we can't give it to them. Second, we care a lot for the individual, so Yelp has an incredibly strong culture of weekly one-on-ones between managers and their reports, but it goes beyond that to what we call skip-level one-on-ones, the employee with their manager's manager. I also, I manage a small product team, and I meet 6 times a month with different engineering leaders and other leaders from around the organization in a private one-on-one to kind of check in with each other and see what's going on. If we care that much about individuals, we should probably support the managers. And so new managers who come into Yelp or people who are promoted into management do a 2 full-day training session at headquarters, meet other new managers, talk about some of these principles that make Yelp's culture work. And we also do sort of ongoing training. So we have relationships with Stanford Business School, because it's right down the street from Yelp, where professors will come in and talk about their research, or they'll talk about trends in applied psychology and things like that to sort of help us be better as a culture. On the product and engineering side, uniquely, I think we have a dedicated recruiting team. It doesn't just mean that within HR there's a recruiting team for engineering, because I think that's pretty common, but the recruiting team actually sits in the engineering organization, reports ultimately to the senior VP of engineering. This is important because it helps us make sure that the values that the engineering team has flow through to the recruiting process, so that those recruiters not just understand the culture, but sort of live it. And actually, there are a lot of other side benefits of that, where the recruiters do things like organize events and hackathons and things like that I'll talk about in a minute. And something that I would say is probably gets a lot more attention in San Francisco than it does, for example, in Hamburg. But something that's really important in Yelp's culture is diversity and inclusion, making sure that everyone, no matter their situation, race, color, creed, feels comfortable working at Yelp and feels supported. So this is a picture from Yelp in the San Francisco Pride Parade, but these are some of the logos of the groups that we've got. Outburst is for LGBT employees, Yelp Parents is for parents like me, and Vet Connect is for military veterans who work in the company. Some of the benefits that we get from these strong values, first, just lots of cross-pollination. Tim was talking about grabbing coffee with some of your peers or your reports. And this is a picture of Yelp's coffee bar on the 8th floor of our headquarters in San Francisco. You can place an order with the friendly barista, and they'll make you a nice cappuccino, and you can sit down. The whole floor is open. It's just benches and couches and stuff. And people are there constantly. This is, I think, a totally staged photo because it's usually ass to elbow people trying to get coffee and find a place to sit. We even have an app that we built called Yelp Beans, where I can sign up for kind of a blind date with someone that I haven't met before and have coffee with them. The system tries to sort of rotate me through the system and meet lots of new people. It's important to get engineering buy-in to the product roadmap. So this is a picture. You're like, why is there an archery picture? This is actually an indoor archery range in Hamburg called Mit Pfeil und Bogen, and this guy's name, the guy in the back, is named Peter Duberstein. He's the owner of that business. And every month in the Hamburg office, we bring in a local business owner to talk to us, and we kind of do just an informal interview. What is it like to start a business? How do you know things are working? How do you measure what's going on? Which tools are you using? And so on. And it's just a great way to help not just the PMs, but the engineers also understand who is their customer and what are they doing. We're all just sort of desk jockeys. We know code and design and all those things, but these people are actually working on the front lines, and we want to know what that's like. Recently, we have a product called Yelp Reservations, which is not operating in Europe, but it's kind of like OpenTable. And the team for Yelp Reservations, actually, everyone has to spend a night manning the front of the house at a restaurant, at one of our customers, to understand how the product works, all the things they run into, and I think probably deal with some cranky customers sometimes as well. On the flip side, PMs, we also encourage PMs to develop a lot of empathy for what engineers are doing. So as an example, when I joined Yelp, I was really shocked at how long it took to push code to production. I was talking to an engineering manager like, dude, what's going on? This is really painful. Can we speed this up somehow? And he goes, hey, why don't you do it yourself? So he paired me with an engineer who, more or less told me what to type, and I got it. I made a small text change, and after that I realized, yeah, wow, it takes a long time, but there's a lot of reasons for it, and this is why Yelp has a stable and predictable site that runs for millions of users, but it really helped me understand kind of some of the things that they deal with. Julia mentioned this earlier, but having a sense of psychological safety helps where PMs and engineers need to rely on each other, and specifically in a brainstorming session, if a product manager wants to generate ideas, their team is there to help them do that, and we like to include engineers in these sessions. But an engineer who doesn't feel a strong relationship to their PM or to the mission of the team or what have you is not going to bring those next level ideas that are really going to move the needle. So this is super important for us, and ultimately I think kind of what this all comes down to. I talked about fun earlier, and there are actually fun things that happen, so I want to talk about those right now. I do need a sip of water, though. I mentioned earlier that we do hackathons. So this is a picture of the opening toast, the mimosa toast at the hackathon probably a year ago. All the engineers in San Francisco do it. We do one in Hamburg as well. We have engineers in London who come visit us, and our office kind of fills to the brim, and we get a lot of fun things done. Ideally, a hackathon is going to generate some really cool product ideas or some technical solutions. Like a couple of years ago, it resulted in this feature that we call Monocle, where you hold your device up at the real world. It's kind of augmented reality, and we tell you what the businesses are nearby, and it shows you how good they are or not. But it also results in lots of wacky stuff, like a K-pop music video that some people made a couple of years ago, or a colleague of mine who built this just ridiculous head-mounted iPad thing just to sort of poke fun at our competitors. So there's a certain level of goofiness that is accepted and celebrated, and usually that comes out the most in hackathons. Near and dear to my heart, no pun intended, is something called Yelp Love. Yelp Love is something that we also developed in a hackathon, and it just lets you send a note of appreciation to someone. Here I'm sending my engineering colleague a note saying, thanks for backing me up. It could be, thanks for the treats that you brought into the office. And you might think it's a bit strong to love your coworkers or to send them love. It sort of sends them an email in their inbox. But it's totally addicting. As an example, these are the top love receivers from last week. Camille in facilities received 116 love. Now, you don't have to receive 116 love to feel like you're being supported and appreciated. Just getting 1 or 2 a week is a really nice boost, and it's been a tremendous, I would say, asset in our stack. And I think, like a lot of companies, we like to get off-site and just get out of the office and interact as human beings rather than as working bees. This is a picture from our off-site last summer with the whole Hamburg office. But each team individually also gets an off-site budget to go each quarter somewhere and do something interesting or fun or cool. There are serious things we deal with, and it's not all fun. Work is not all fun, as I mentioned earlier. So I wanted to talk about those as well, because I think that's also an important part of how a company's culture expresses itself. First is something called postmortems. Postmortem is what they use in the medical industry to describe the examination of a body after death. At Yelp, it just means examining a mistake that was made. And the sort of process is that if there's a P0 bug, right, a really high priority bug, the manager of that team will assign the postmortem to someone, usually the person who was, I'll just say responsible. But that person then goes out and starts gathering information, tries to understand what happened, what will we do better next time, how can we learn from this, right? It's all about a learning mindset. And the important thing is that this is actually not about assigning blame. It's about learning and how can we do this better next time. This goes out to every engineer and product manager in the company. So if something goes wrong, you will see it. You will see it and you'll be able to read about it in mind-bending detail. But that's part of what helps us kind of continually improve. And there's no shame behind it whatsoever. I've done these on my own as well. If I fuck up, here's a postmortem. Here's what I think went wrong and what we're going to do next time. Also, people leaving the company. This is, I think, a sensitive topic across the industry. I wouldn't say we celebrate it, but we absolutely acknowledge it. And we want to make sure that when somebody leaves the company, everybody knows this is what this person contributed to Yelp. Here's how long they've been here. Here's what we're doing to replace them or to backfill what they were doing. And we thank them and we sort of send them off with dignity, which I think is a really important part of what makes the culture strong. And of course, there are some challenges. We haven't figured this all out. We're not perfect, so I thought I'd talk about those as well. Space is really tough. In Hamburg, we actually have lots of space, so if anyone's interested, please join us. But in San Francisco, we have 14 floors of a downtown office building, and real estate in San Francisco is really tight, so we try to get as many people in there working as productively as possible. But it means that if you're on the second floor, you're probably not talking to a lot of people on the 10th floor. Things like coffee dates and things like that help, but it's a challenge. Scale is a challenge. Yelp's revenue is growing 20% year over year, so our staff is going to be growing at a reasonably close rate, and we can't ignore that problem. So we have to come up with a solution. In a similar way, direct relationships sort of fall apart, right? Once you scale past that magic number of 150, people don't always know each other, and so that's a real challenge. Managers like myself hold what we call office hours, where anybody can come by and chat about what's on their mind. It's a nice opportunity to give people who need attention some of it, and other people who don't care. they just don't come and they get their work done. But it's a bit of an outlet, especially our senior VPs of product and engineering both do this. And if you're a intern who just joined the company, you can go chat with them about whatever's on your mind, which I think is important. And then lastly, I talked about diversity earlier, but we're not winning in diversity. It's a serious challenge. If you look at the third row, that's the tech, the third column, those are the technology teams, product and engineering. And we're still figuring it out. We're trying to find new ways to find gender balance and ethnic diversity as well, and it's a challenge. We do sometimes get kudos. We got a Best Places to Work award from the Human Rights Campaign, which is an LGBT rights organization in the United States, but there's lots of work to be done there as well. So I'm going to wrap up here. First, culture is super important. I mean, if it wasn't obvious from the first 4 presentations at this conference being about culture, then let's talk afterwards. You can't force it. You can't just say, oh, we've got 100 people and our culture is going to be like this. It has to really reflect the people that you have. The really brilliant thing is that if your culture is strong and well established, the people who join the company then adopt that culture as their own, and it works quite nicely. You have to be open to failure. Not everything's going to work. As an example, we open sourced Yelp Love a couple of years ago, and people who have left Yelp, who appreciated Yelp Love, have implemented it at their own company, and it has failed. No one uses it. So if your company isn't receptive to that kind of thing, or if it's not set up to be responsive to that, it may not work. And you have to be open to, stepping back on things that don't work. And in the same vein, you kind of have to constantly evaluate and adjust. Yelp's culture 5 years ago is not the same one that we have today, and it won't be the same in 5 years. So we're always evaluating. You can sort of refer to it as your culture stack, right? You got all these tools for people to connect, and if you're not evaluating, then it's probably not working for you. So that's all I have. I want to say thanks for your time. Hopefully I gave you some ideas that you can take back to your own workplace. And if there's any questions out there, I'm happy to take them. Thanks a lot.